participant has joined the meeting. A participant has joined the meeting.
Good morning, everybody. The VRE Operations Board meeting will now come to order. Rich, will you review the participation instructions for the meeting?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. To mute or unmute your microphone, only click on the microphone icon on your computer. No changes to your phone are necessary. If you wish to send a chat message to an administrator, click on the chat icon. Reminder, no public business can be conducted over the chat. Also, to raise your hand for questions or comments, open up the participant window, click the hand icon next to your name to raise your hand. The only visual component of this meeting is the presentation slides, which are being shown to those on WebEx and on the VRE YouTube channel. These slides include photos of the main speakers. Chairman Skinner will ask for questions or comments after receiving a motion and a second to consider each resolution. To indicate you have a question or comment and wish to raise your hand, click on the participant button and then on the hand icon next to your name in the participant list. Keep the participant window open, which should show up on the right side of your screen. Mr. Hostelka will be monitoring the hand raising function and will let the chairman know if there are any questions. When called upon, please announce your name and to whom your question comment is directed. There will be a roll call vote for each item. Please follow the roll call and be ready to unmute when your name is called.
Excuse me. One last thing too is if at any time you lose us as far as volume, you can't hear somebody who's speaking, please let us know and we'll try to correct the problem. Would the board clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Alcorn?
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Banks?
I am here.
Ms. Bennett Parker?
Here.
Ms. Baumke?
Here.
Ms. Crystal?
Here.
Ms. Franklin?
Here.
Mr. Kelly? Ms. Lawson?
Here.
Ms. Mitchell?
Here.
Ms. Shelton?
Here.
Mr. Skinner?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Stork? Mr. Walkinshaw? Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I'll move on to action item 3A resolution, finding need to conduct the October 16th meeting, 2020 meeting electronically. Rich, will you please take it from here?
Sir, Mr. Chair, the VRE Operations Board finds that meeting by electronic means is authorized because the nature of the current declared emergency makes it both impractical and unsafe for Operations Board to assemble in a single location, are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations, and the discharge of the Operations Board lawful duties and the items
A
on today's
participant has left the meeting.
encompassed within the continuity of operations ordinances adopted by several member localities of the VRE to assure continued operation during the disaster posed by the public health emergency resulting from COVID-19.
All right. Do I have a motion and a second approve resolution number 3-10-2020, finding need to conduct the October 16th, 2020 meeting electronically?
Mr. Chairman, this is Katie Crystal. Move approval of the resolution.
Second, Elizabeth Bennett Parker.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. Are there any questions regarding this resolution? If none, would the clerk please call the roll for the vote?
Mr. Alcorn,
Aye.
Mr. Banks,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Bomke,
Aye.
Ms. Crystal,
Aye.
Ms. Franklin,
Aye.
Ms. Lawson,
Aye.
Ms. Mitchell,
Aye.
Ms. Shelton,
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that resolution.
Thank you very much. All right, approval of
Stork is
the,
here as well.
I'm sorry?
Supervisor Stork is here as well from Mount Vernon District, Fairfax County.
Thank you, sir. Okay. And I noticed you didn't call Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly didn't respond to the roll call.
Okay. All right. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
So moved, Elizabeth Bennett Parker.
Second, Meg Bomke.
Okay. Do I have any questions pertaining to it or any changes or additions? And please call the roll call for the vote.
Mr. Alcorn,
Aye.
Mr. Banks, Ms. Bennett Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Bomke,
Aye.
Ms. Crystal,
Aye.
Ms. Franklin,
Aye.
Ms. Lawson,
Aye.
Ms. Mitchell,
Aye.
Ms. Shelton,
Aye.
Mr. Skinner,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Stork,
Aye.
and that resolution passes.
Thank you. We now need to approve the minutes of the September 18th, 2020 VRE Operations Board meeting. Can I have a motion and a second, please?
Ralph Smith, I move approval.
And I'll second that. Walter Alcorn.
Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes? Will the clerk please call the roll for the vote on approving the minutes?
Mr. Alcorn,
Aye.
Mr. Banks,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Bomke,
Aye.
Ms. Crystal,
Aye.
Ms. Franklin,
Aye.
Ms. Lawson,
Aye.
Ms. Mitchell,
Aye.
Ms. Shelton,
Aye.
Mr. Skinner,
Abstain?
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Stork,
Aye.
and the motion passes.
All right, moving on to chairman's comments. Just want to welcome everybody to the 2020 VRA Operations Board meeting. I would like to start putting together the 2021 Operation Board Officers Nomination Committee. And I'm going to surprise her, but I was going to ask Supervisor Lawson to chair it this year. Do you have any objections to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought that we were going to go to NVTC next year, no?
No,
The nominating committee.
we're just gonna,
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I clearly need more caffeine. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
thank you. Okay, so anyone interested in being on the committee, please let me know. And also, if you're interested in being nominated for a position as an officer in 2021, please let Supervisor Lawson know or myself. In particular, we are looking for a new treasurer from our PRTC members. For those new people, we alternate from NVTC to PRTC every year. So if you are currently at PRTC meeting and you would like to run for the treasurer, please let myself or Supervisor Lawson know. Okay. I'd like to congratulate and CFO Mark Schofield, and all the accounting folks working at VRE for receiving the 13th consecutive Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. The certificate is awarded by the Government Finance Officers Association and is the highest form of recognition in governmental accounting and financial reporting. They said VRE's financial report for fiscal year 2019 met the association's highest standards, which include demonstrating a constructive spirit of transparency and full disclosure to clearly communicate its financial story and motivate potential users and user groups to read the report. And now I'll turn it over to CEO Rich Dalton to give his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Operations Board members and others. I hope all of you and your families remain safe and healthy. To start, in conjunction with Keolis's quarterly safety huddle, during the week of September 21st, VRE recognized the service of 56 Keolis Rail Services Virginia employees.
Has joined the meeting.
Both the transportation and mechanical teams. Specifically, I presented 40 10-year and 16 5-year service awards. We have been marking service milestones with Keolis since 2015, which was the 5th year of our operations and maintenance contract with Keolis. And as somewhat depicted in the background of the picture on the right in front of you, one of arguably the most appreciated parts of this ceremony was the taco truck that was at each of these events. As ridership continues to return, the continued emphasis on enhanced cleaning processes, social distancing, the wearing of face coverings, hand hygiene remains paramount. We still observe a strong daily compliance of passengers wearing face coverings on board VRE trains and at our stations. VRE staff continue to work primarily from remote work environments, and we continue to maintain continuity of operations. For the month, you can see the trend in monthly ridership here as it slowly has increased, as you can see from the May-June timeframe. We continue to operate a S schedule, and of course, we continue to take a measured approach to returning service to normal levels, and with an eye on either adding cars or adding additional trains to stay slightly ahead of demand for managing social distancing. Overall, ridership continues to be down, compared to the same period last year. But again, as you can see, particularly, I mentioned before May, June, but even after the July phase 3 reopening, we're slowly, ridership continues to slowly tick back up. The average daily ridership for September was just over $1,300 people for the month of September. And again, as I've mentioned before, we have, ridership continues, or even on an average daily ridership perspective, it continues to increase, albeit one rider at a time. At this point, too, I want to do just from an update on our operations plan for the rest of the calendar year. With the current demand or ridership at the level that it is now, we would typically operate at least a reduced service the day after Thanksgiving, and for the past several years on Christmas Eve. We've elected to not operate the day after Thanksgiving and on Christmas Eve. Even pre-COVID, the ridership levels are very low. And of course, if we continue in this trend here, our ridership on those 2 days specifically will be next to nothing. We would predict ridership for the day, in the double-digit numbers. So again, just in keeping with our prudent fiscal management as we continue to transition through this time, we are electing to not operate service again on the day after Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve. Along the same lines, of course, most of you know, we have an annual Santa Train event that we normally do in December. This year it would have been December 12th, and that too will be somewhat scaled back. What we are currently working on, and I'll get back to you with the details. We still want to be able to do something, with the emphasis on our partnership with the Marine Corps and Toys for Tots. So again, staff's working on the details of that, and I'll put something out to the operations board when we have those details worked out. But again, in the spirit of ensuring that we're not putting folks in an unsafe and unhealthy environment, it's likely we're not going to operate our Santa trains this year. On-time performance still is strong. We saw 96% system-wide the month of September, and of course the breakdown is in front of you between the Manassas line and the Fredericksburg line. As I reported last month, I added an added feature to my report is a project spotlight, and so coming forward at each meeting, I will put the spotlight on a project. As you know, we have at various levels projects going on at all 19 of our stations, including Washington Union Station, and both of our maintenance and storage facilities. So this month, wanted to spotlight Alexandria Station. As the bar at the top indicates, we are in the final design phase. There's an artist rendition of what some of those improvements will look like. Just want to remind the primary purpose of this project is to eliminate the at-grade pedestrian crossing and provide elevator access to the east platform. Another element is to raise the platform height to eliminate step boxes, which would be on the west platform, and simply improve track and platform geometry. And then, of course, the other objective of this project is to provide direct passenger access to the track one side. As indicated up here, we're in the final design phase. We look to completing that sometime hopefully by about March of 2021, with the procurement for construction to soon follow. It's likely to take a couple of months, with the projected start of construction in August of 2021. And if we hit that date, then it's the construction duration would take us out for a project completion of about March of 2023. Again, some of those dates are obviously contingent on processes, primarily from the completion of the final design, and so some of those dates might move around. But just to give you some perspective of where we're at on this project. Very excited to continue to move this project along. I did want to highlight, as a result of discussions from our September meeting relative to the changes in delegation of authority and other previous requests, I'm enhancing the current procurement activity section of my weekly report that all of you see, that comes to you about noonish on Fridays. And those updates will include upcoming option year awards and upcoming solicitations, again, in the amount above 200,000 K and of course below 1 million. Again, this is subsequent to the discussions we had last board meeting. And so we'll this will be the first place that you see it. I'll just emphasize that if you see something on this report that you want more detail, you want a debrief, you want more discussion or whatever, please feel free to contact me directly. And we'll provide enough information in here for you to get some, a sense of obviously what the contract or the purchase is and what the timelines are and stuff like that. And this will be somewhat of a working process. We'll enhance it as we go. The idea is to get the information that you seek on those relative topics. Last month, I showed you a train utilization page that we added to our website to aid passengers in determining which trains to ride based on current capacity levels. I just want to highlight this one here. This is the same information or similar information that I presented last month, but in this case, the Greater Washington Partnership Transit Tracker website is now, we're actually now feeding that information into their efforts, which is more of a regional global effort. And so the point here is simply to get this information out to the masses, in order for riders, to inform riders specifically on the capacity we have on individual trains, and that'll aid in their decision on which trains to ride on any given day. Okay, we continue to emphasize our commitment to the health and safety of our passengers and staff as riders return. We continue to refresh our messaging, as you see here, transitioning from a seasonal perspective. And again, directly to our riders through train talks, social media, and on the VRE website. Again, as I will continue to do, I just want to thank our staff, onboard train crews, transportation managers, the facility and mechanical operation teams, and others for their efforts executing and maintaining the additional safety and health measures. I'll point out too that I've had the opportunity the last couple of weeks to spend time at various origination stations, and our riders have shown me their sincere appreciation for the measures we have taken and our commitment to continue to provide a vital transportation link for them. That's the end of my report. Mr. Chair, any questions?
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions for Rich? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. Public comments for this meeting were taken electronically. The public comment period opened 1 week ago today and closed at 8 a.m. this morning. At this time, Leslie, do we have any comments?
Mr. Chairman, we have not received any public comments.
All right, we'll move on to action items then at this time. 9A, authorization to execute a contract for construction of rolling road station improvements. Rich, will you please introduce the item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the recommendation, we're asking for authorization to execute a contract with Sumter Contracting Corp. Of Fairfax, Virginia, for construction of the rolling road station improvements in the amount stated in the resolution plus a contingency for a total amount not to exceed $2,457,921. Simply, this authorization will enable us to continue progress on this project. Arguably the most important piece of it, which is actually going out and constructing the improvements. And just a quick reminder, this particular project will extend the existing platform by approximately 300 feet to accommodate longer trains. And more specifically, the current platform is sized for us to be able to open the doors on 5 cars. And of course, when we're operating an 8-car train, we can't open all the doors. This helps us mitigate or minimize our dwell times and keeps the network fluent. In addition to the platform extension, the installation of additional canopy coverage, new LED lighting, There'll be a second walkway coming off of that new extended platform to access the parking lot. And then similar to the Lorton platform extension that we completed a couple of years ago, we will essentially rehabilitate the existing platform as part of this project as well. Platform being synonymous with canopy structures, repainting, lighting, etc. So when we're done, this entire facility will have not only had a platform extension, but just simply be refreshed and spruced up. So that's my summary, Mr. Chair.
Any questions? Okay. May I have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 9A?
Move approval, Mr. Chairman. Second, Crystal.
Okay, thank you very much. And once again, are there any questions? Will the clerk please call the roll for the vote to approve Resolution 9?
Mr. Alcorn,
Aye.
Mr. Banks,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker,
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Crystal,
Aye.
Ms. Franklin,
Aye.
Ms. Lawson,
Aye.
Ms. Mitchell,
Aye.
Ms. Shelton,
Aye.
Mr. Skinner,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Stork,
Aye.
Mr. Walkinshaw.
Aye.
And Mr. Chairman, the resolution passes.
Thank you very much. Moving on to 9B, authorization to amend the GEC 7 task order for the final design services for the Franconia-Springfield station improvements. Rich, will you present it, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're seeking authorization to amend the existing task order for final design services for the Franconia-Springfield station improvements with STV Incorporated under the GEC 7 contract in the amount plus a contingency stated in the resolution for a total amount for this task order not to exceed $1,003,837. Just essentially this amendment, what this will do is it includes the need to develop 3 alternative designs and cost estimates to accommodate the east side pedestrian access, which will lead to modifying the existing design and cost estimate. These alternatives, the need for these alternatives will address the ability to provide access to and from the station from the neighborhoods to the east of this station via a pedestrian ramp, tunnel, overhead pedestrian crossing under the future 3rd and 4th tracks. And just a point of emphasis here, originally this project did not contemplate that, but as we have continued to collaborate with our partners at DRPT and CSX, it became evident that the need to go ahead and design this and get this constructed before the state came in and constructed a 3rd and or 4th track in that area has become paramount. So that's my summary, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions for Rich at this time? All right. May I have a motion and a second to Resolution 9B?
So moved by Alcorn.
Second.
Who seconded, please?
Mr. Smith was ready.
Second by Stork.
Thank you very much. Would you please call for the vote, the roll call?
Mr. Alcorn,
Aye.
Mr. Banks,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Blomke,
Aye.
Ms. Crystal,
Aye.
Ms. Franklin,
Aye.
Ms. Lawson,
Aye.
Ms. Mitchell?
Aye.
Ms. Schultz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Stork?
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Walkinshaw?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the resolution passes.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to 9C, recommend authorization to execute an agreement for design, construction, operation, and maintenance of a parking garage at the VRE Manassas Park Station. Rich, would you talk about the issue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what we're seeking is a recommendation to the commissions to authorize the CEO to execute an agreement with the City of Manassas Park for the design, construction, operation, and maintenance of the parking garage at the VRE Manassas Park Station. This action will also authorize the CEO to execute all deeds and other instruments required to accept the conveyance of real property by the city to the commissions. So the background information in this agenda item's fairly detailed, but let me just kind of break down some of the key elements of this agreement that's being recommended. So for design, just one thing I want to lift out here is that obviously we've been in close collaboration with the city of Manassas Park, working well together on a design. This goes back a couple of years, and through this current design process, at a point last fall, the city had requested that previously we had selected a site, if you will, that's not only, it's not just adjacent to the current Manassas Park Station. If you can visualize, it's actually on the other side of the tracks or just north of the tracks. And there was a site there that was selected. And again, the city came back to us in the fall, requested, because they had just recently purchased other land parcels in the area, requested that we move that site slightly to the left, if you will, or slightly to the west. And so we agreed, but since we were already at the approximate 60% design level, we had, we collaborated with the city. The city agreed that in order to take the design and adapt that to the new site, that would take some additional design work. And again, the city agreed to go ahead and fund that for us. And so so effectively, that's the point that we're at. This agreement, again, contemplates or memorializes all of that understanding on how that will work. And then, of course, once we get back to the 60% design level, then VRE will take that to a 100% design level and complete that, prep the design work for construction. And just as a reminder, we did receive funding through the NVTA for the design process. So at the point that we get back to the 60% design level, we'll utilize the money from NVTA to complete that design. I'll also emphasize that through this process as well, NVTA, of course, being the primary funding partner for us on that, we met, collaborated, and NVTA is fully informed of what we're doing here. So on the construction side, VRE will expend an amount of $23.5 million for construction. That's what we have, the funding that we have for this, and that comes from the I-66 outside the Beltway concessionaire funds. The contract or the proposed agreement does contemplate if additional funds are needed. Of course, the city and VRE will continue to work cooperatively to identify a source of additional funds or simply identify portions of this project that could be constructed separately by the city or its development partner. Just to, again, to visualize this parking garage will soon be intermixed with some other development activities that the city of Manassas Park is doing. So on the operations and maintenance side, the garage will be designed for approximately 675 spaces. Approximately 544 of those spaces will be dedicated to VRE riders. The remaining 131 spaces will be dedicated for use by the city. Again, the garage is located adjacent to the station, but across the tracks to the north. So this station also will have, not just elevators to transition through the multiple floors, but there will be a pedestrian walkway over the tracks and then subsequent elevator stair apparatus to get folks back down to the existing platform. So you can visualize that a little bit. We don't need to do anything with the existing platform other than drop an elevator bank down onto it. So we in the agreement also memorializes and contemplates a share of the maintenance costs. As noted before, there'll be some city dedicated spaces, but the majority of the spaces will be dedicated for VRE. And I'll just say this is not uncommon for us in a couple other agreements to share these costs. Specifically, the city of Manassas, we have a parking garage there, and we, in a similar fashion, we share those maintenance costs with the city as well. And then this agreement also memorializes the need to complete the conveyance of land for the previous expansion lot project and the conveyance of land for the new parking garage. And then finally, the agreement also considers a process whereby the city can reacquire ownership of the garage parcel in the event the commission cease operations and fail to use the parking garage at a point in the future. And I will just say, this is an element of the agreement that we're still working to finalize. This is somewhat unprecedented for us, where we would have an agreement whereby something like this that we have constructed would have in the deed some clauses where the property and or garage would revert back to the other party. But again, keep this in mind, this is in the event that, of course, the commissions cease the operations of VRE. So I'll just say that at this point, the city's proposed, again, a process whereby that the garage parcel and subsequently the garage could revert back to them, or they reacquired at no cost to them. And of course, our staff has proposed that there be some process where we recognize our proportional investment in the project, and so we're still working that element of the agreement. That's my report.
Anybody have any questions on this topic? All right, hearing no questions, may I have a motion and second to approve resolution 9C?
This is Banks. I move for approval.
This is Lawson. I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay. Would you, Leslie, please call the roll?
Mr. Alcorn?
Aye.
Banks?
Aye.
Bennett Parker?
Aye.
Lomke?
Aye.
Ms. Crystal?
Aye.
Ms. Franklin?
Aye.
Ms. Lawson?
Aye.
Ms. Mitchell?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Aye.
Mr. Skinner?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Stork?
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Walkinshaw?
Aye.
Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, that motion passes.
Thank you, Leslie. Appreciate it. Moving on to information items. Rich, will you provide the board with a briefing on the VRE-Virginia Passenger Rail Authority agreements, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will try to be brief, but this is there's a lot of elements to both of these agreements. So let me just kind of do a little table setting here for a second. We have been working with DRPT staff on agreements. There's two agreements. One is an access agreement as it relates to the Transforming Rail in Virginia program, and again we'll get into that as well. But I just want to point out there's two agreements we're going to talk about here. The first will be the access agreement, and then as alluded to in previous discussions, as most recently through our discussions on the budget and stuff, there is a funding agreement as well. So the intent of our presentation, or the intent of our discussion here, is to just simply bring you up to date where we're at in this process, give you information. We also have, of course, Mark Schofield. I will toss to him here in a little bit. He'll actually go through the funding agreement. Note that that Director Mitchell is at the virtual meeting as well, and I will invite her for comment. And of course, our legal counsel, Steve McIsaac, is participating in the virtual meeting as well. So, and the other thing I want to preface here is that the work on these two agreements have been ongoing, and we're finally getting to a point where we need to put a finer point and eventually bring these to both the operations board as a recommended action to the commissions, and then subsequently to the commission. So that gives you an idea of the timeline that we're working on here. So with that, we'll just get right into this. So again, just as a quick overview, there are, these are the two agreements with the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, the operating and access and funding agreement. They have somewhat longer names, if you will, the actual agreements, but moving forward, we'll likely just refer to them separately as the operating and access and funding agreement. So just as a reminder, the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, just thought it would be good to just, put this up here for a second, and just as described in the statute, the purpose of the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. I won't read it word for word, but obviously the work that we are doing in conjunction with DRPT on these agreements are consistent with the purpose as stated in the statute. I also just wanted to bring up that recently, and we dispersed this information to the operations board, recently the board of directors for the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority was announced. And just as a reminder, there's 15 members, 12 non-legislative members appointed by the governor. And of course, the VRE CEO sits on the authority board as an ex officio or non-voting member, similar to an Amtrak designee. And the DRPT director is the chair. And just as a quick update, the meetings will occur quarterly, with the first authority meeting planned for October 26th. Okay, so first of all, again, the passenger rail operations and access agreement, or the operating access agreement. I'm just going to go over these major, component areas of the agreement, give you some idea of how this is shaping up, and those are the 5 areas there. So from an operations standpoint, again, the rail authority will acquire right-of-way in the, what is referred to in our current service area as the Fredericksburg line. And essentially, if you look at, to some degree, this map, albeit it might not be at some level of detail, depending on how you're viewing it, but just from a north to south perspective, from Spotsylvania, the Spotsylvania station all the way at the bottom, all the way up to the Franconia-Springfield area. If you could just imagine the right-of-way will essentially be split in half, and the western side of the right-of-way remains with CSX, where the rail authority acquires the eastern half of the right-of-way. And then, as you know, there's a bypass project that will convert trains on or about that Franconia-Springfield area to the west side. And the rail authority will essentially own the right-of-way there, going up to and including the new Long Bridge, which will be upstream or on that west side of the right-of-way, lined up to take a left-hand turn eventually into Washington Union Station. The other elements, just to keep folks, just to keep you apprised, at the point that this acquisition happens, VRE essentially needs an access agreement to operate on top of property owned by the rail authority. CSX will continue to dispatch and provide track maintenance over the top of that right of way. Okay, so and there's some agreements that DRPT is working out with CSX on those components. So you can just visualize, and I'm just going to use a very, very simple rounded numbers here. If that entire segment is 60 miles, and at the point of the right-of-way acquisition, the VPRA, or the rail authority, has 20 of those miles, well, then VRE would operate on 20 of those miles that are owned by the rail authority, and then 40 miles that are owned by CSX. So therein lies the need to primarily not only have an agreement or an access agreement with the rail authority, but to maintain an access agreement with CSX. Okay, that's really the point I wanted to make here. So there's, again, different components under this heading that continue to be refined as we move along in this process. Just want to highlight on access fees. At least at this point, there are no increases that are anticipated. I'll just remind everybody that currently, through state operating assistance, and I know that there's a more granular name for those funding agreements and stuff, but VRE has provided approximately 85% of our access fees for the current NS, CSX, and Amtrak agreements. Now we will, of course, need to include this access agreement with the rail authority, either within those funding agreements or another method for state operating assistance. I just want to point out, in this agreement here does not contemplate at this point that essentially that 85% contribution. So there'll be further actions that need to happen here. One of the other elements here is that through our discussions with DRPT staff, the rail authority will essentially pay CSX actual costs for maintenance and et cetera. But, and so it's contemplated that VRE will just simply pay a proportional share of those costs. And we're all used to paying our access fees, particularly with CSX and Norfolk Southern, and these train mile lease fees, so many dollars and cents per mile. The proportional share, if you will, is could be similar to a train mile fee, but we just simply haven't got there yet, at least to have that precisely nailed down. So and so again, there are details and terms that we continue to work out under access fees. Station leases. Again, start off with there are no contemplated increases with station leases. In fact, it's likely that where we land on the exact terms as it relates to the station leases, it's likely to be just a nominal cost to us. I'll point out, similar to current station lease agreements that we have with our other host railroads, it's essentially that the host railroad owns the ground and, owns the ground under the platform and anything else in the right of way. And then, of course, the commissions retain ownership control of station platforms and those associated elements. One of the elements of the current station lease piece of this agreement is really getting down into the legal definition of ownership, control, et cetera. And I'm going to show you something here while we want to make sure we get all of this right. But again, it's similar, it's the same, but if you will, to our CSX and Norfolk Southern lease agreements with some differences. So I want to show you this diagram, and I think it does a decent idea, albeit it's not necessarily focused, but I just want to orientate you to something. This is an overhead shot of the Woodbridge station. To the right on center, there's a box describing the garage, which is that grade square area there. To the north of that is a surface parking lot. To the south of that is essentially a kiss and ride type loop there. Working your way to the left, that blue shaded area is, and I should have prefaced this by saying this isn't finalized, but this is what we're working with right now, is that blue shaded area would depict what the rail authority would acquire in their right-of-way acquisition. Right smack dab in the center of that is a black hash mark that would represent the existing east side platform. The red, moving to the left, the red outlined area represents the existing west side platform. And then, of course, the yellow line to the left indicates the current CSX right-of-way. All of that to say, and this is, we can almost characterize this as the worst example, but this is not worse in terms of bad, but just kind of showing all of these elements whereby, particularly where, in this case, where we would still maintain a station lease with CSX as indicated in the red outlined or red hash mark station, because that's still going to remain in the CSX right of way. Okay. And then the station lease portion of our access agreement with the Commonwealth or with the rail authority will contemplate that black hashed out mark area within the blue. But I also want to point back to this, we have to make sure that we clearly define or clearly understand this concept of control, access, and that type of stuff. Because as you can see here, we have a scenario whereby, we would have, and we have this today, whereby passengers coming off of Amtrak hit these platforms, and then of course they enter into property that's owned and controlled by the commission. So again, just wanted to use this as a highlight to sort of break that down. Just want to hit on planned improvements. Some of this you've already seen. This doesn't necessarily change within this agreement. And those are the planned improvements that were announced back in December of last year. Again, this agreement, it contemplates the results of that, but it doesn't change any of those planned improvements. Planned additional service. This agreement will contemplate, well, let me back up. This agreement will memorialize what those planned service improvements are once the planned improvements have been completed. And this was announced before. There's a round trip Fredericksburg train, round trip Manassas train post acquisition. And then as the planned improvements by phase are constructed, there's additional train slots, including weekend service, that become available to VRE. And that's sort of the box at the bottom. But I do want to point out that, of course, VRE will be permitted to operate these additional train slots. But one thing that we are working with our respective teams and stuff is just this. Obviously, we all have a goal here of constructing these planned improvements and operating additional trains. But we have to recognize too that if there's an event where VRE, specifically with this agreement, does not, at some point after the phased improvement has been implemented, doesn't go ahead and add that additional service, what happens to those train slots, right? So those are some things that we are currently contemplating and negotiating in the agreement. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for a second and just, as it relates to the access agreement, and maybe invite if Director Mitchell has any comments. I would say Steve McIsaac have any comments, because we're going to go in a slightly different direction, albeit they're somewhat intertwined. But
Ms. Mitchell, would you have anything to say at this time or add to it?
No, not at all. I think Rich has done a really good job summarizing this, and I know we're going to get into some more detail about the agreements itself. Just a quick note about the Passenger Rail Authority. As Rich mentioned, we're going to have our first board meeting on October 26th. We are in the process of getting the authority mobilized, which is probably going to take at least a year in terms of getting it fully staffed up, hiring an executive director, and building up the administrative side of the organization. But in the meantime, DRPT is continuing to act on behalf of the Rail Authority and continuing to move forward with the mission. So while this does refer to the Passenger Rail Authority, because that's how we have it drafted right now, essentially it is an agreement that's being negotiated between DRPT and VRE. So that's all I've got right now, but also happy to answer questions if there are any.
Director Mitchell, I got one question. Are these meetings that you'll have, will they be open to the public? Or are they going to?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to use a WebEx format very similar to this, where people can participate with a YouTube channel. We do expect for the time being that our meetings will be virtual. We do hope that because this is a new board and board dynamics and relationships are obviously important to any board, that we hope at someday we can start meeting in person in a safe manner. But for now, they will be virtual.
Thank you. Mr. McIsaac, do you have anything to offer? Or?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I don't want to belabor this at all. I think Rich has given an excellent sort of overview of where we're headed with this agreement. I will say to you that ordinarily we would be in a situation, we probably do this presentation in closed session, but because the Commonwealth is actually a member of the body, we actually cannot do that. So it's a little bit odd. And I will say to you a couple of things just to kind of give some perspective on this. And I'll look back a little bit historically and say that, the history of VRE over the past 30 years or so has been one of having to deal with the freight railroads who simply do not want us on their line. We were regarded as interlopers, and it was oftentimes a very contentious relationship. We've worked hard to kind of get that to a point where we had a good relationship, and we always had the Commonwealth to turn to help us intervene or to intervene on our behalf to get the railroads to come around. Now we're entering into a very different situation where the Commonwealth is actually going to own much of the territory that we're going to operate on. And that is really a very, very good thing. But as the lawyer, we end up sinking into details and need to make you folks aware of what are some of the downsides of the agreement. And I think, as Rich said, we are working through all of these details. Jennifer and the folks working with her have been very responsive to concerns we have raised. And I think that the things that I would identify for you as kind of overarching concerns that you should have in mind as we get to finalizing these terms, they're in two areas. One is the extent to which the terms of the agreement give the rail authority what I would call undue control over the equipment we operate, the operators we choose to contract with to run our service, and how we maintain and use and who can use our stations. And the other area is, and this goes to funding, which is always a major problem for the commission. But as Mark will explain to you briefly, we are proposing to commit about $15 million a year for the next 10 years, plus another $7.5 million a year for another 15 or 20 years as we continue to pay off debt service to improve the right of way that the Commonwealth is acquiring. But at the same time, the terms of the agreement could actually permit the rail authority to introduce a competing commuter rail operator and even terminate the commissions from operating on the line at all in the event that we are unable to fund the cost to operate service. And that's a fairly stark term. And I think that we have to understand that the Commonwealth is spending a significant amount of money to acquire and improve this right of way, and they want to maximize the use of it. And we understand that, but we have to work through this one very difficult issue. So I think that I actually feel somewhat optimistic about being able to work through this with the Commonwealth, but I wanted to at least alert you to it that the fact that the Commonwealth is acquiring this is not necessarily the ultimate salvation for the commission. There will be some difficult issues going forward, and we're trying to work this agreement in a way that will protect the commission's interests over time.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Any other questions? All right, move on with the funding agreement.
Yeah, moving on. So the funding agreement, again, as mentioned at the onset of this, there's a companion funding agreement here, and I'm going to ask Mr. Schofield to give us an overview of that funding agreement.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, board members. I think it has been clear since the governor's announcement last year of the landmark deal that VRE is a major beneficiary of the state's proposed investments. And given the need to bring together $3.7 billion in funding in order to make the program happen, it seems that a contribution from VRE is a reasonable thing to ask. And the natural source for us to make this contribution is the CROC. And so I want to give a sort of a quick refresher on the CROC, and then I'll talk about the structure of what we're proposing here with the funding agreement. So the CROC was created by the General Assembly back in 2018 to support commuter rail in the Commonwealth, which means VRE. Compared to many other sources, it has relatively few strings attached to it. It can be used for operations. It can be used to pay for capital improvements on a pay-go basis, pay-as-you-go or cash, and it can even be leveraged into a debt issuance. The only limitation is that no more than two-thirds of the CROC can be committed to debt. Right now, VRE is receiving $15 million a year through the CROC from the fuel taxes that are collected in the PRTC and the NVTC regions. We started receiving those funds in FY19, and we have committed 3 years worth, 19, 20, and 21, to critical station expansion projects, namely Crystal City and LaFont. If you recall, we laid out an explicit prioritization or decision-making process in order to how to use the CROC, and we made those decisions based on those two projects, LaFont in particular, being difficult to get other grants to do it, since that project is located in the District of Columbia, on being able to leverage other resources. And we were just recently allocated almost 16 million by the NBTA to do the construction of the Crystal City Station. And then just generally on these being transformative type projects that really will impact VRE in the long run. We have not committed any of the CROC then for FY22 or years past that. Okay, so as part of last year's budget, the board authorized us to continue those discussions with DRPT on making a contribution to the overall program. The concept from the beginning has been a mixture of debt so that we could make a large one-time contribution that can help advance key early components within the program, and then an ongoing PAYGO or cash contribution that would support the design and the construction of the other projects within the program on a longer term basis. The easiest way to think about it, at least conceptually, and Steve just indicated this in his comments, is that for a period of 10 years, the entire $15 million worth of this CROC would be going towards this $3.7 billion program, either as debt or as cash. After that 10 years is over, the cash part comes back to us, but then we continue to pay the debt. So the debt piece of this is obviously the more complicated piece. The commitment that we have landed on is that half of the CROC, $7.5 million a year, would be committed to debt. This is well within that 2/3 statutory maximum. This is a little bit the reverse of how you might normally approach a municipal debt issuance. Normally you would say, we need a certain amount of money to do a school or a sewer project or something like that, and we want to minimize the debt service each year that goes along with that. Again, here we're kind of doing the reverse. We're saying we have a fixed amount that we can commit to debt service, and we want to maximize the amount of the proceeds that we can get out of it. You might think of it a little bit like how you buy a home. You know how much you can afford each month on your monthly mortgage payment, and then you can use that to look for houses that are within your price range. So we have committed then with the Commonwealth, that's subject to prudent fiscal management, that we will work to maximize the proceeds. That does not mean, of course, that we're going to lock up these funds and do a 99-year debt issuance or anything crazy like that. We're also not going to get into a debt structure that leaves us highly exposed to interest rate risk down the road. But again, we intend to be partners with the Commonwealth on this, and we understand that every dollar counts to them to moving the program and making it work. So right now, again, the sort of the terms that we're discussing is a commitment of $7.5 million a year over a 30-year term, which we would hope would leverage north of $100 million in order to contribute to the initial purchase of the right-of-way. Of course, the general market conditions at the time of the issuance, as well as a sort of specific look at the creditworthiness of an issuance backed by the CROC, are going to determine ultimately what the amount of the proceeds are that we generate. We also are not going to limit ourselves to debt issued by the commissions. As you know, we have utilized the RIF program that the USDOT has in the past, previously to purchase rail cars. We recently utilized the Virginia Resources Authority to refi that debt. We will look at those types of options. We will look at TIFIA. We will look at everything to see what is the best option for the commissions and for the rail authority. So then the counterpart to the debt component, of course, is the PAYGO or the cash component, which is the other $7.5 million per year. Our initial discussions with DRPT have centered on using these funds for projects that have a clear benefit for VRE. So things like the Long Bridge, things like the bypass in Springfield, and things like the Alexandria 4th track. The key point here, again, is that 10-year duration is, round number approximately when we would expect Longbridge to be open. So that then those funds would sort of return to VRE and be available to support the operation, the expanded operations that we can do in the corridor once that new crossing of the Potomac is there. I want to be candid at the outset that doing a CROC-backed debt issuance is not going to be a walk in the park. If this agreement is approved by the board and by the commissions, we will need to engage immediately with our bond counsel and with our financial advisor. We've been talking, of course, with them a little bit along the way as we've been talking about the agreement. One of the first things that we will come back to this board to do is to update our debt management policies, which we originally adopted back in 2013. Those policies did not contemplate anything like the debt issuance that we're talking about here. And so PFM, who is our financial advisor, they will assist us in making sure that we have the right guidance in place, that we have the oversight in place that we need to make sure that we are exercising that prudent fiscal management and that we're protecting the interests of the taxpayers and the riders now and into the future. We will quickly need to do essentially an initial credit assessment that says, is this going to be an investment grade credit? That will tell us what our options are for doing the debt issuance, tell us what kind of reserves we might need to build up in order to give comfort to potential investors, since this will be what they call a naked pledge of the revenues from the CROC. And then they get sort of in parallel with the credit assessment, maybe a little bit behind it, we would look more closely and more comprehensively at those debt options. Again, RIF and TIFIA, VRA, all of those things that I mentioned, but of course also looking at doing the direct issuance by the commissions. In order to maximize those proceeds like we talked about, we want this to qualify, of course, as a tax-exempt issuance. When you are a county and you're building a school, it's pretty easy to check those boxes for tax exempt, but purchasing railroad right-of-way in this context is certainly more complex. And so doing the tax due diligence will be a significant task for us. And all of that, of course, is just the beginning. Once we get through all of that, we'll have to go through the underwriting, the marketing, the pricing, all of the things that go along with a debt issuance. And there will be at least one other opportunity or requirement, rather, for us to bring agreements to you, the board, that you will need to approve and that the commissions will need to approve. Our goal, again, working very closely with DRPT and VPRA, would be to have this in place and have the proceeds in hand one year from now. That is pretty aggressive. There are things that could come up that could impact the timeline. If we did go the RIF or TIFIA route, we would expect to have negotiations with the feds. Those can take a while. If we do go the commission issued route, we might have the potential for bond validation. Again, we are committing to the Commonwealth that we will work quickly and cooperatively with them on this, but it will be a big lift. So, and so since we are on the topic of next steps, I will hand it back to Rich, and he will talk about what remains to be done over the next month or 2 months. And then after that, I would be happy to answer some questions as well.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Yeah, just quickly, we continue to collaborate. We are on a timeline, if you will, where we would likely come back to the operations board in November to recommend a action to the commissions, and then subsequently take that to the commissions in December. I do want to note too that we've talked substance, we've talked context, if you will, in both agreements here. But there is one area which usually falls at the end of agreements as it relates to default termination clauses and stuff like that. And we are starting to scratch the surface on some of those elements as well. So with that, Mr. Chair, I just recommend again, open it up to either Director Mitchell or Steve McGisaac, our legal counsel, to see if they have anything to add on this topic and as it relates, not just next steps, but the funding agreement topic as well.
Director Mitchell, do you have any comments?
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you. And first of all, I do want to emphasize how much we appreciate the partnership that we've had with VRE on this, and especially the work that Rich and Mark and Steve have been doing with us. I think it has been a very good partnership. This is a really important component of our overall funding plan. The debt issuance itself is, the timing of it has somewhat been necessitated because of COVID and a negative impact on our state revenues. And so it is very important for us that we be able to have access to these funds when in late 2021, and due to some of the early upfront payments we have with CSX. So it is that is somewhat a reason for the timing of this and why that's so important. I do also want to note that, you know, a big reason that the Commonwealth is making this investment is for VRE, and VRE is a major beneficiary of this $3.7 billion investment. As part of this, we're not investing in infrastructure and land just to own infrastructure and land. It's really for service. And so as part of this, we will be getting the 5 new round trips on the Fredericksburg line, plus the additional round trips on the Manassas line, of course, subject to further negotiation with NS. But more importantly, we'll have a pretty much dedicated commuter and passenger system north of Franconia once all of this is built out. And our long-term goal, as Steve mentioned, really is full separation and the ability to build a fully dedicated track in VRE territory between Spotsylvania and DC. So again, I'm happy to answer questions about this and the reasons for the timing, the use of the funds, but it is a very important component of our overall funding plan. So thanks.
Chair Skinner, we do have a question from Ms. Bomke.
Ms. Bomke, would you like to ask that question, please?
Sure. I find this all very interesting. And as we all know, interest rates are at an all-time low. And just doing some quick and dirty math at a 7.5% debt service on 30-year money at 5%, you know, we could raise, as Mark said, upwards of 100 million. I calculated about 115 million. But, you know, my big concern is over inflation, which we might get next year. And just doing some really quick math, at a 10% interest rate for 30 years with 7.5 million as your debt service, your purchasing power goes down to 70 million. So, you know, that's a difference of about 45 million. So I guess just very rough, for every percentage increase in an interest rate costs you about $14 million in purchasing power. So, you know, it's so significant right now that interest rates are just so unbelievably low. And hopefully that interest rate environment will continue into next year. But my real question was about, Mark made a comment that these bonds would be naked, or what I refer to as non-rated. I'm sure PFM has given you information in this area. Are you guys looking at doing some kind of a insurance on these? Would you be able to go out into the insurance market and get these bonds insured such that they would be, you know, considered AAA in the market, or what are they, or a letter of credit, or, you know, what are they anticipating?
That's a great question. Thank you. We have not reached the point to discuss the bonds yet. We've mostly been discussing what level of reserves that VRE might need to have to give comfort to the investors. I'm sure insurance, once we get a little further down the road, I'm sure insurance will rise up as a topic, and I would be happy to provide information back to the board at that time.
Yeah, because that's going to be what's going to increase the cost of your overall issuances if you have to go figuring out where the market is in that whole arena and what's out there and what's going to be there after the election and kind of what all your alternative and options are.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I didn't hear that, Mark, but I think you said maybe, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Skinner, we have a question from Mr. Stork.
Mr. Stork, would you present your question, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. This is very, I think this is an opportunity for us. I fully want to explore it. I don't think I have anywhere near enough information to really feel good about that decision. I've seen some slides today. I don't have any copies that I can actually go through. And I would also like, I guess, more information on it. So I'm not sure the best way to do that. I'm happy to meet remotely, or if you have materials, even better, if you have materials that you can provide me with a bit more background on this, I appreciate that. But I'd like to obviously be far more knowledgeable and prepared prior to our next meeting, because I don't feel like I have, other than this presentation, which I think has a lot of, I think there's a lot of promise in what you're proposing. It makes a lot of sense, but I don't feel good enough about what I know to be able to make a quality decision. So is there an approach that you're using to provide more information?
Rich?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is, again, part of that process. There's been various levels of conversation, discussion. This was an attempt to sort of bring everybody together on where we're at today. And there will be continued discussion even more intently over the course of the next several weeks. But more specifically, Mr. Stork, we can get you all this information that's up here today.
Why don't we do it this way? Mark, you seem to know all the financial stuff and everything. How about if you get in contact with Mr. Stork
I'd be happy.
and see if you can get what particular things he needs? It may be very general at this time, but and that really goes for any of the other members too. We can make it multiple if we have to, but Mark, if you would take care of that. Mr. Stork, he'll call you at some time, either after this meeting or early next, and get everything from you that you would like.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that and look forward to that.
Thank you. Any other questions, Robert?
No.
Okay. I'll open it up. If you haven't, is there any other questions you have for Rich or Mark on this subject?
Mr. Chairman, this is Katie Crystal with one question. Going back to the sort of configuration of the rail and what that means for our service, Rich, the first item you presented, you shared the intent to be delivering additional round trip trains in the, I think, PM and then also weekend service. Are there dates attached to that yet? Or we sort of, the situation is that the Long Bridge has to be done and then we'll revisit the dates of service expansion?
So dates, there's timelines. Yeah. Go back and I think the best way to answer your question is, as those additional planned service increases happen, yes, there has to be infrastructure improvements to support that. And so there are,
we'll take that in December to the commissions. So starting off on the state side, Robert, if you'll switch the slide. Excuse me. So of course, as you can imagine, we expect that much of the legislative activity in 2021 is going to be related to the pandemic impacts. So we'll be monitoring anything that would have any effect on VRE, whether that be on the funding side or VRE operations or just how we run VRE as an organization. That would include things like changes to sick leave policies, hazard pay and employee liability issues, and also anything having to do with state funding. I know in the special session right now, there is language moving forward that will allow the CTB to have a lot of flexibility moving money around to make sure that they can do what they can with the extremely low amounts of revenue that we've been seeing over the last couple of months. In addition, as you heard, CROC money is going to be pretty important to the Long Bridge and the Transforming Rail in Virginia project. So we'll keep an eye on anything that would possibly affect any of the CROC funding. Also, the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, as that gets up and running, we'll keep an eye on that. As Rich mentioned, he will be an ex officio member, as will Director Mitchell. And as the new policies and administrative procedures are developed, we'll make sure that we're engaging with them and keeping an eye on what's going on there. And then one of the items that we just added was meetings held through electronic communication means. And I believe Ms. Bennett Parker would like to speak to this issue.
Thank you. The FOIA Council's Electronic Meeting Subcommittee is actually meeting next Tuesday to discuss potential changes they may recommend to the General Assembly regarding electronic participation in electronic meetings. I personally think that we should consider weighing in on this issue, but would like to know what my colleagues think. There have been some specific proposals, so I'll talk through what those are. As I think everyone is very aware at this point, in Virginia, public bodies are only allowed to meet virtually when there is a governor-declared emergency. And prior to action taken by the General Assembly in April on the budget bill, only items that pertain to the emergency could be discussed at those meetings. Current law does allow members of all public bodies to participate electronically up to 2 times per calendar year for personal matters, subject to certain requirements, such as the physical presence of a quorum at the meeting location and the adoption of electronic participation policy by the public body. Current law also has a provision specifically for members of regional bodies that would allow a member to participate electronically if they live 60 miles from the meeting location. There is a quorum physically present, the body has adopted a written electronic participation policy, and the location from which the member participated is recorded in the minutes. One of the FOIA Council members has prepared a draft for discussion that proposes 3 main changes to the law. First, it would codify the changes made in April regarding our ability to meet electronically during a declared emergency and discuss more than just the emergency. Second, it would remove the numerical cap on the number of times a member could participate electronically for personal matters. And third, it would change the section for regional bodies to remove the requirement that a quorum of the body must be present at the primary meeting location. However, it seems like members would still only be able to participate electronically if they lived more than 60 miles from the meeting location or if they had a personal matter. Personally, I support all these changes and would like to also see the removal of the 60-mile requirements because I think that doesn't apply to any of us, but I think we still all spend significant time traveling to VRE meetings. And I think experience with COVID has shown us that we can have virtual meetings that are open and accessible to the public. In many cases, I think we've even seen that virtual meetings can increase public participation. We serve riders from across the region, and we rarely have any public participation at our meetings. I've noticed this morning that our meetings held virtually have each had 115 to 240 views. I absolutely appreciate the value of in-person meetings. I'm not suggesting that we would have only virtual meetings or that anyone should participate only electronically, but I believe that increased flexibility for public bodies and their members would be beneficial to VRE. I would especially point to a number of occasions when our various committee meetings have run short or had to be rescheduled because our main meetings have run long and people need to leave. If we were able to hold these meetings electronically, we would have the flexibility to schedule them at times other than right after our main meeting with proper noticing, of course. So with that, I'll stop talking. I appreciate the opportunity to share this and would love to know what my colleagues think.
Thank you, Parker. If there's anybody like to add, please identify yourself and let us hear it.
This is Supervisor Franklin. Just want to echo everything Ms. Bennett Parker mentioned. We had a good conversation about this. So very supportive.
Mr. Chairman, this is Katie Crystal. I very much support as well. I think, like Margaret, I chair one of our 2 parent commissions, and I know that this need would be so helpful for us at that level, and certainly for VRE. I can also imagine, that VRE together we represent nearly all of Planning District 8 in the state, and so hopefully we could have an impact on the deliberations of the FOIA Council. I wanted to ask Ms. Bennett Parker, I know, I believe actually anyway, this is in our proposed legislative agenda that goes to the commissions, but the timing is such that the FOIA Council is deliberating before those November meetings. Is that right?
So my understanding, there's a meeting on Tuesday. I would imagine there may be meetings after that, but the first subcommittee meeting is on Tuesday, and that draft has been put forward for discussion.
Got it. So I would be supportive. Obviously we need to be really cautious in how we speak as the board because we, aren't our own entity. We're merely a project of the 2 commissions. But if there's a way that we could represent, so the sort of consensus of the operations board members subject to approval of the commissions, I think that could be impactful if others agree.
I will say this, Gary. Joe and I spoke to this, and Joe, it's an issue that's been brought up before, right, Joe? And we talked about starting slowly, I think. And Joe, the recommendation was maybe look at having 4 a year or some of that. Could you?
I mean, certainly that was just a number I was throwing out as an example, rather than, as Ms. Bennett Parker mentioned, rather than asking for the ability to have all meetings be electronic. If we had the ability to have a certain amount, 2 a year, 3 a year, 4 a year, something like that. And that was a suggestion that Steve McIsaac actually made when we discussed this a week or so ago. But I can certainly get with Ms. Bennett Parker and anybody else who'd like to discuss this further, and we can figure out exactly what the language in the agenda should speak to, and how we can deal with this FOIA meeting that's going to go on Tuesday and any subsequent FOIA meetings.
Okay, thank you.
This is Supervisor Bomke in Stafford County, and I echo Ms. Bennett Parker's thoughts and comments on this. I think that COVID has proved that all these Zoom and virtual meetings can be conducted very well and save a lot of people a lot of time on the interstate, especially being in Region 7. We're obviously further down the interstate, Gary Skinner, Matt Kelly, Cindy Shelton. So I think there needs to be some flexibility, and I would support this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other comments? All right. Well, thank you for that input, Ms. Bennett Parker. I appreciate everybody else's input. Last thing, Steve, did you have anything that you might add to this?
No, Mr. Chairman, I do not. I'm happy to answer any questions, though.
Okay. All right. Moving on then. We'll start with the spending.
Well, I have a couple more items on the legislative agenda.
Excuse me.
We'll finish this up real quickly. The last 3 items on the state funding or on the state issues are things that we've had on our legislative agenda before, supporting any actions that would fully restore funding to MBTA. Of course, the Virginia Transit Association also often comes out with proposals having to do with increasing funding for public transportation. So we will analyze anything that comes from them or anybody else who comes out with a public transportation or rail related proposal. And at Mr. Kelly's request, we are going to keep an eye on anything that would have to do with the creation of an additional transportation authority that would include members of the VRE. On the federal side, these are mostly items that continue on from this year, I guess, technically. Surface transportation reauthorization, Congress has punted on this. There's a continuing resolution So we'll start working on this again next year. The Surface Transportation Board Authority, this is an issue that we've been watching for a couple of years now. The Amtrak on-time performance is the same. In particular, that's one where they are going to come up with a way to monitor Amtrak's on-time performance. And we want to make sure that however that works itself out, that it doesn't impact the way that the freight rails would deal with commuter rails like us. Our biggest worry is that they would be so concerned about making sure that Amtrak stayed on time that they would literally sort of set a VRE off to the side or hold it in a station to let an Amtrak train go by. So we want to make sure that that sort of legislation or policy doesn't pass. Other USDOT rulemaking, we're always watching to see what's coming on there. Not a whole lot has been happening lately. The liability insurance reform, as I mentioned at the committee, we had it was very expensive this year compared to previous years to fully fund the insurance that we're required to get. And that has nothing to do with VRE in particular. That is throughout the country, commuter rails and other people who get the same kind of large insurance policies that we do had the same sort of issues. So there has been some reforms that people like the American Public Transportation Association and others have been investigating, and we will keep an eye on those as well. And then, of course, anything that having to do with COVID relief. That's it on the federal side. Any hands raised there, Robert?
Is there anybody that have comments or would like to make a comment to Joe? Okay, thank you very much. And Joe, then we'll move on to
Chair Skinner, can we check and see if Mr. Stork has a question? His hand is raised.
Mr. Stork, do you have a question on this, please?
No, I'm sorry. It must have been from earlier and I didn't unraise it, so.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Okay, move on to the 2022 budget update. I believe Mark will brief us on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not have a slide presentation today. I just want to give the board a quick update of where we are and just tee up some more substantive discussions in November and December. Our projections for the 22 operating budget haven't changed materially since we were here last month. We continue to work on the expense side to reduce discretionary expenses where we can. That will help to extend the availability of our CARES Act money. On the revenue side, ridership, of course, remains our most significant unknown. We continue to watch, hopefully, for changes in the trend, but at the moment, ridership does remain essentially flat. So our projection of approximately 10 million in revenue for 21 and 18 million for 22 remains where it is. I would like to emphasize again, the $86 million that we were allocated in the CARES Act represents essentially 2 years worth of passenger revenues. And we should be able to rely on that to backfill those lost passenger revenues through this year and next year, and potentially into FY23 if we need to. That will allow us to avoid any sort of immediate or draconian cuts either to the level of service that we provide or to the headcount here at VRE, and then be able to evaluate commuting patterns post-pandemic and react accordingly, and again, not have to make any sort of rash decisions. On the capital side, we are continuing to update the scopes and the schedules and the budgets for all of our projects, particularly in light of the Transforming Rail in Virginia program. One of the real benefits of that program, I hope this has come out in our discussions over the last couple of months, is that we will be able to achieve the same benefits for passengers in terms of increased capacity and reliability without having to spend as much as we were originally looking to spend on our station expansions. And that in turn has freed up some of that money to advance the other projects that we have. And I just want to give you two brief examples, one of which you all acted on last month and one that we were discussing just earlier this morning. So the construction, the Quantico station has been able to advance because we were able to reprogram some of the smart scale money that we had from the Brook station project, while still, again, advancing the overall goals that we have of our smart scale line capacity expansion program. And then Rolling Road, which we just discussed this morning, that construction is able to advance because we were able to reprogram some CMAQ money from the Lorton station project. Again, while still improving the VRE facilities within the county, within Fairfax County. We've been working really closely with TRPT on mapping out all of these different transfers, and we have made a lot of progress over the last couple of months. I want to express my thanks to Director Mitchell and her team for that. I also want to express my thanks to all the transportation team members at Fairfax County for their help with Rolling Road. We have a couple more of these transfers in the pipeline, be bringing to you relatively soon. And I think it's really encouraging that we have everyone sort of working together to try to find the best ways to use these funds, particularly in the current environment that we're in. So we will be back in November with more details. We should be essentially wrapping up with where we are on the FY22 budget. We'll talk more about what it means to have a balanced budget in the context that we're in when we're having to rely on the CARES Act money. We'll see if we have any better clarity on ridership and where that's going, and a number of other topics. So at this point, if people have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. If there are particular issues that you would like to make sure that we do address next month, we would be happy to have that guidance as well. So with that, I'll turn it back to the chair.
Does anybody have any questions for Mark? All righty, since we have no questions, we'll move on to the spending authority. Go back to Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to highlight the fact that, again, from the September meeting, the delegation of authority limits changed, specifically as it relates to contract awards, increased to $200,000. So this spending authority report moving forward, you will see obviously some additional information in there as we move forward with those expanded delegation of authority limits. The only one we have to report here that still falls within that $50,000 to now $200,000 range is we did do a task order with PFM Financial Advisors for a subscription to a financial modeling platform that we continue to use. So that's it, Mr. Chair.
Any questions for Rich? All right, we have no closed session today, so Leslie, if you would go around to each board member and ask them if they have anything to say. It's board time at this point.
Mr. Alcorn,
Nothing today. Thank you very much.
Mr. Banks,
Nothing today, thanks.
Ms. Bennett Parker,
Nothing today, thank you.
Ms. Bomke,
I'll defer. Thank you.
Ms. Crystal,
No comments, thanks.
Ms. Franklin,
No comments.
Ms. Lawson,
Pass.
Ms. Mitchell.
Just to follow up on the comments from Mr. Stork, I just wanted to let you all know that I know that, especially because many of you are new board members that weren't on the board last year, I will be more than happy to brief any of you on the Transforming Rail with Virginia initiative, particularly as it relates to the funding agreement with VRE. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Shelton,
I'll pass. Thank you.
Mr. Smith,
I pass, no comment.
Mr. Stork,
Yes, thank you. I just, what's would be truly helpful to me, I don't know if other board members would benefit from it as well, but if I can get copies of presentations so that I can have them at my desk when items are being presented, it gives me an opportunity to write notes on it and make other kind of questions and other kinds of comments that I may want to follow up on later. And it's difficult to do that in a remote setting when you're just seeing something on the screen and maybe there's something available that I missed, but I didn't find that those items were available ahead of time. Thank you.
Thank you. We will do that. Have that taken care of. Okay.
and Mr. Walkinshaw.
No comments.
Okay, I have just one comment. As you hopefully realize that Spotsylvania got the VA clinic, a 500,000 square foot clinic, bring about 20,000 jobs. Why I'm bringing it up is because depending on where you have to go, either into DC or into Richmond to go to a military clinic, all right, I would like emphasis put on the north and southbound trains. I realize we have 3 years to put the clinic up, and that's pushing it. But at one time, we've talked in a 2040 plan, I believe, having northbound, southbound trains. And so possibly keep it in the back of your mind, please, Rich, that the sooner the better, because traveling 10 miles north to a clinic is going to be much harder than traveling a train down to Spotsy, where we'll have buses that go from the train station over to the clinic. So just something to keep in mind. The sooner the better, as far as we feel it is, as far as Spotsy. Other than that, I will ask one more time if there's somebody who's got anything would like to speak up. Okay, seeing none, I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Ms. Bomke.
Flossman, second.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. Quick roll call.
Mr. Alcorn.
Aye.
Mr. Banks. Mr. Banks,
Aye.
Ms. Bennett Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Bomke,
Aye.
Ms. Crystal,
Yes.
Ms. Franklin,
Aye.
Ms. Lawson,
Aye.
Ms. Mitchell,
Aye.
Ms. Shelton,
Aye.
Right?
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Stork,
Yes, yes.
Mr. Walkinshaw,
Aye. Aye.
All right.
and Mr. Clark. The meeting is adjourned.
Well, thank you very much for everybody attending it. Have a safe weekend. And don't hesitate to call Mark or Joe or Rich if you have any questions for them. And we'll see you at the next meeting, hopefully. Be safe out there. Meeting is adjourned.
The meeting. A participant has left the meeting.